Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from July 3rd to the 9th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of it as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the US industry, identify top US MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, of course pending whatever incremental reform we get from now until the end of the year, and that's what we're looking out for. But we're going to start with some news that we got on Wednesday after I published my midweek update, as Maryland cannabis sales topped 10 million during opening weekend of adult use market state reports. Couldn't ask for much more than that. So from Friday through Sunday, collective rec and med cannabis purchases reached 10.4 million, which is more than double the 3.9 in medical cannabis sales that the state saw during last year's 4th of July holiday weekend. And so the first official day of adult use sales on Saturday, Maryland sold 4.5 million worth of cannabis. The vast majority, 3.5 million, came from rec cannabis purchases, while medical cannabis sales totaled 959,000 for the day, which was to be expected, as we've seen this in nearly all other markets as well. And from my understanding, once the medicine becomes available recreationally, there's just less hoops to jump through, so more patients flock to the rec stores to just get what they know works for them. And so a bit more down here, but to highlight, thank the Lord that they opened 100 dispensaries for adult use so they can properly supply the legal demand. So nearly 100 of the state's existing medical dispensaries were approved for dual licensing to serve adult customers, and the MCA also said it collected more than 15 million in licensing conversion fees from those facilities that will be distributed to community reinvestment funds. And so let's just hope that these funds get reallocated properly, as it plans to provide another 45 million from those fees over the next 18 months. And so there's a bit more detail down here, otherwise full link in the description. But with that, we move on to Illinois. Well, we've got Illinois adult use cannabis sales figures for the month of June, updated as of July 3rd. But I wanted to scroll down so that you can compare last spring to this spring. And I really hope the difference is those extra 185 social equity licenses actually turning into dispensaries and driving more legal sales, because more legal outlets does make a difference, especially offsetting the black market. As last year, the biggest month they had to start off the year was April. And then after April, we saw May fall off in every category, and then June fall off in every category, again, before jumping up in July as we typically see. But this year we saw March having the biggest number. Well, April fell down a little bit, and again, Missouri came online this year, and so we're seeing a lot of Illinois residents going to Missouri and other states around it just because the tax rate is much lower than in Illinois. But despite that, we actually see May outsell April in every single category, and then June outsold May in every single category. And so not sure what to expect for July. I imagine it's going to be bigger because it is every year, but this was unexpected, and I'm very happy to see this, and it's big for every MSO in Illinois. We've got this one from Jesse Redmond with the same data but in visual form, pointing out the one thing I forgot to mention is looking deeper, year-to-date total in-state sales are up 12.6%, fortunately to offset the fact that out-of-state sales are down 13.73% due to Missouri, of course, launching their adult use program, taxes being much lower in Missouri, and therefore Illinois is losing the border store revenue. However, I think one thing to point out, the fact that Illinois sales are growing stronger leads me to believe that the 185 social equity licenses are finally turning into dispensaries and giving those promised this opportunity years ago finally a chance to play ball. So nonetheless, that's good for Illinois, and more legal outlets will drive more legal sales for the MSOs in that state. While from the weed CFO, some interesting data to look at. The source comes from California BDS, and as counterintuitive as it is, people like inhaling shit for whatever reason. And so just highlights that flower remains king, but no doubt edibles and drinks are probably going to become more popular as, of course, we normalize the substance, as it should have been normalized a long time ago. And one more from the weed CFO. This one is quite eye-opening. As the US sells more black market weed than the rest of the world combined, a truly dominant performance. But take these numbers with a grain of salt, because of course the black market isn't reporting their data. And so this comes from BDSA's best 2023 projections, I guess. Now, how would one resolve this issue? The same way you resolved alcohol prohibition, by ending prohibition outright because it doesn't work, and then launching a legal regulated market to offset the black market. And one can only speculate why that hasn't happened yet. If you've read your history, possibly there's an entity playing both sides and benefiting from it, like we saw in Iran-Contra, like we saw when troops were guarding poppy fields in Afghanistan. And so take what I say with a grain of salt, but just to show you this one too, this is what it looks like without the US. With under 3 million people, Jamaica's got the strongest per capita market. Very interesting. To me, Canada looks very low, but again, these numbers, who actually knows, right? And so with that, from the Green Market Report, back to the legal market and what can help those actually trying to play by the rules. Ending 280E could be a bigger than SAFE or TSX uplisting. And so while invite you to pause to read for details, especially if you're new to this channel. It's worth remembering that most businesses, if not all businesses in the US, can take tax deductions on various expenses, which helps the company's profitability, but not cannabis. And this is how the government continues to discriminate against this industry only with the predatory 280E tax, especially when you consider the fact that in states that have legalized for medical or rec, we see a 25% or more decrease in opioid overdoses. And the fact that the US government doesn't want to acknowledge that, and that this industry is changing the status quo for the better and get behind them to support them, as opposed to continue to discriminate, is horseshit. But I digress. The adjustment would add approximately $700 million to the 2023 free cash flow of the companies reviewed below. And so just highlighting, you can pause to read 280E impact on MSO free cash flow, but the blue bar at the bottom shows free cash flow with 280E taxes. The orange bar shows adjustment to eliminate 280E taxes, and then the green is free cash flow with 280E eliminated. And remember, if cannabis is rescheduled to Schedule 3 or descheduled completely, 280E goes away. And so that's one of the big things we are waiting for. Again, this data comes from Viridian Capital Advisors. Well, you can pause to read the last bit down here, but good news, folks. We are closer than ever to ending this blatant discrimination once and for all. And so get excited, reach out to your senators and state reps, and tell them why they ought to support safe and descheduling cannabis outright. And so with that, for Marijuana Moment, another one from Weldon Angelos: continue to put on the pressure, but we need less talk and we just need action from Congress, right? As Biden must support fully descheduling cannabis to finally end unjust criminalization, former prisoner says. And so, of course, you can grab the link in the description if you wanted to go through this. But timely, as well as Wiley Online Library puts out this short research article as of June 30th. And why this isn't blasted on every mainstream media outlet, I do not know. Actually, I do know, because most of it is brought to you and paid by Pfizer, and they don't want that. But the high and the lows, rec cannabis laws and mental health treatment. Rec cannabis laws continue to grow in popularity, but the effects on mental health treatment are unclear, according to people that don't look at the data. But the results indicate that shortly after a state adopts a recreational or medical cannabis legality position, they experience a decrease in the average number of mental health treatment admissions. Say that again. They experience a decrease in the average number of mental health treatment admissions. So the findings are driven by white, black, and Medicaid-funded admissions and are consistent for both male and female admissions. So read it and read more data to tell us what we already know. Cannabis is a good thing for mental health. And so grab the link in the description if you want to go through the full thing. But on top of that, this one from High Times, and while I'm not a woman, so I don't really have anything to say about this, apparently middle-aged women using cannabis to alleviate menopause, survey finds when they ask some Canadian women. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you can pause to read some of the highlights up here. And then a little bit more down here. In their conclusion, the researchers said that some of the women are using cannabis for symptoms related to menopause, and that additional research is required to assess safety and efficacy of cannabis for managing menopause and develop clinical resources for women on cannabis and menopause. Unfortunately, in Canada, we can effectively research that a lot quicker than in the US, who still needs to deschedule, so we can frame these studies in the right way and look for the medical benefits and take them seriously. But a little bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read, otherwise full link in the description. But with that, even from Politico, GOP House member Matt Gaetz proposes end to cannabis testing for military. And I will admit, I don't know the first thing about Matt Gaetz. However, when I was still an emotionally charged shit lib a few years back, I did eat up all of the hit pieces that the media wrote about him. But fortunately, in America, innocent until proven guilty reigns supreme, and all those allegations ended up being false. And so I just got to say, for him to have the courage to call for this, I have a lot of respect for him, especially because it's a complete waste to still be testing. They've been wasting resources for decades testing for cannabis when they don't test for alcohol or opioids or prescription medication. And if you were to get rid of the cannabis testing, you'd likely just recruit better overall quality individuals into the military. And so this comes as the increasing number of recruits who test positive for cannabis use, particularly in states where it is legal to do so, and nearly 33% more recruits tested positive in 2022 than in 2020. Instead of blocking off 33% of recruits, and the bullshit testing. Duh. And then this isn't the only amendment, as another one would allow doctors at the VA to give medical opinions on cannabis, as they should have decades ago as well, use as a treatment to patients in states where medical cannabis is legal. And while we do love this, we've seen in the past, anything cannabis friendly in the NDAA usually doesn't make it. And so while we love this effort, chances are in December, when the House and Senate come together to, bring the two bills together to make them one, anything cannabis related will not be added in. I hope that they will. What do you think this time around? Will we see some cannabis friendly bills in? Let me know in the comments. With that, on to MSO News, as the Dales Report shares an interview with Executive Chairman of TerraSend, Jason Wild, how TerraSend successfully listed on the TSX Trade to Black. So if you want to learn about that, full link will be in the description if you wanted to go through it. But with that, some news from Air Wellness, as Air Wellness announces refinancing and upsizing of Gainesville Cultivation Facility mortgage. And so today they announced, or at least on the 7th, they announced that it has closed a $40 million refinancing and upsizing of its existing mortgage for its Gainesville cultivation facility. And so So proceeds from that loan will be used to pay down some of the company's existing mortgage of $25.3 million, which was due to mature in May 2024, and invest further in the facility and the company's Florida business. So it seems like they're pretty bullish on Florida's 2024 ballot initiative being a thing, while the new loan carries an interest rate of 5-year FHLB rate plus 4%, which currently implies a rate of 8.26%. And I am a shareholder in Air Wellness, although it's a small position of mine. I do like to see them refinance and get a cheaper rate to kick debt down the road, especially when you consider the amount of growth they're expecting this year at roughly 400 to 500 million in revenue, depending on how much new markets allow dispensaries to open up. But when you consider that Air Wellness Friday close, their full market cap was just $64 million. So in theory, you could buy this company for $64 million, although they would never sell because of the growth potential. The fact that they can get 40 million refinancing while being valued at 64 million does lead me to believe that while these MSOs have been money pits up until now, if we get that incremental reform, they're going to be very, very good investments. But again, that's not advice. This is just my opinion and why I've put my money where my mouth is. Well, this one from Curaleaf. Curaleaf celebrates launch of adult use sales at Groton, Connecticut dispensary, which is their third dispensary in Connecticut to offer adult use sales. So good job, Curaleaf, expanding in some of these lesser competitive markets. So of course you can pause to read, but this is on top of earlier this year, Curaleaf started adult use cannabis sales at its Stamford and Hartford locations and began offering adult use products via wholesale to other dispensaries across the market. And so with that, on to some other news, as Jesse Redmond interviewed the CFO of Verano Brands, Aaron Miles. And so I did not go through this podcast yet. I do plan to listen to it. I'll put the link in the description. Here's a clip. I'm not going to play it because the video is going to be too long, but here Aaron explains how getting to Schedule 3 or less removes 280E, which would have saved Verano about $100 million in taxes last year, as we saw in here. But what they do note on here is that the fact that it hasn't happened yet is just going to make when it happens all that much bigger. And so again, full link in the description if you wanted to go through that. Well, apparently from Weed Street 420, one of the bigger bears in the industry, or at least the bigger bears on Twitter, Verano just filed a shelf prospectus to raise up to $1 billion in equity. But take this with a grain of salt as well, because Weed Street 420 is notorious for spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt at any chance that he's given, which I think is counterproductive because we're all on the same team waiting for the next bull market. But I guess it's a good perspective to have to contrast with mine. And for whatever reason, he has to make fun of other people to feel better about himself. Whatever floats your boat. But you can read what Verano listed as the use of proceeds, but good common sense from Canna Investments down here, as every time a company files a shelf, overreactions follow. And while we've seen Canadian LPs do this in the past, while they've managed the money horribly, there were multiple times where you could buy low and sell high and make a ton of money, obviously helpful from the exposure on major US exchanges, right? And so all that to say is that MSO is getting this chance this time around, and they're much healthier. Think of how profitable they'll be when you remove 280. It's a completely different story once that's gone, right? So a $1 billion shelf doesn't mean Verano intends to raise $1 billion in equity tomorrow. You have a shelf open to raise equity quicker in the future if you wish to do so, should the industry get a catalyst, for example. And do you think Verano might know something that we don't? Probably. They can use any portion of the $1 billion. And so I'll bring you back up and just click on this so that you can pause, read if you're interested. But what was very interesting is that on the same day, we also saw Curaleaf file shelf to raise up to $1 billion as well. Now, again, doesn't mean they're going to do it all on the same day or anytime soon, but it gives them the option to do that. But you got to wonder, Verano's doing this now, Curaleaf, do they know of a catalyst that's coming that we don't? Well, the big rumors of this week from Reuters was that Altria-backed cannabis producer Cronos was exploring a sale. And so I think this is where we saw the attention turn to the cannabis space a bit more, as the Canadian cannabis producer backed by cigarette maker Altria confirmed on Thursday it is in talks with potential buyers to explore a sale of the company after Reuters reported on the talks. While Cronos is working with a financial advisor to handle expressions of interest in a deal with other companies, including US-based peer Curaleaf Holdings, according to people familiar with the matter. And so this was some of the unexpected news that we got. And what makes Cronos attractive in my point of view, or from what I was told, is that they have $838 million in cash and $3 million in debt. And so, I mean, if you can raise that much equity to buy a treasure chest, $838 million of cash, seems like it's a good deal. But again, this is speculation, straight up speculation, as Toby Cannabis, M&A speculation, which is fun to do while we're all sitting here twiddling our thumbs on the weekend waiting for next week. Company A wants the cash plus international assets. Company B wants a larger company with US assets. Company C wants to upgrade their stake in B to A. And so a good question here. Okay, Toby, if you were Boris, how would you structure this deal with $848 million in cash? Cronos has something Boris wants. Cash with no debt. What's the market cap of Curaleaf? how would Curaleaf do this deal? And so again, a lot of speculation, but just figured I would share some of the answers if you were interested. But what do you think about this deal, folks? Let me know in the comments. I think it's very interesting. And then we saw this response from Curaleaf Holdings Inc. announcement regarding market rumors. But isn't it interesting that all this happens a week before Congress is set to return July 11th and finally mark up the Safe Banking Act for the first time ever? And so Curaleaf adds the company's policy is to refrain from commenting on market rumors, and the company does not intend to make further comment unless required by law. Although I saw somewhere on Twitter that I think regulators wanted them to make an initial comment because of all the buzz, and I see this as a way that Curaleaf can confirm the rumor without actually confirming the rumor. But what do you think? Is it going to be another sell the news event, or could we finally get a long overdue victory for the industry and start to see the snowball roll? So let me know in the comments if you think this time is different or not. But on to some state news for marijuana moment. As cannabis banking bill signed into law by Missouri governor, love to see this big victory for MSOs and single state operators in the state, but it comes with a little more strings attached that I'm not a big fan of. But what do I do? So Missouri's cannabis businesses will have fewer obstacles when it comes to accessing banking, but they must now get fingerprint background checks from all their new employees and contractors under legislation that Gov. Mike Parsons signed on Thursday. And so I don't know why they need to make a database of employees and contractors in the industry, but at least along with that, they do get access to banking, which is better. And so you can pause to read the rest there. You can scroll down to read a little bit more of the details, and then I'll bring you down a little bit further. Otherwise, of course, full link is in the description below. But with that, some more news as Pennsylvania lawmakers introduced bipartisan cannabis legalization bill. And while we've seen this effort almost introduced nearly every single year for the past 3 years, it seems like they are at it again and trying to make this adult use a reality in Pennsylvania. And so I'm just going to leave this here if you wanted to pause to read, but I will update you once they make some progress because it always is a hard time getting through the legislature. Well, apparently Ohio could join 23 states that legalize rec cannabis in November 2023 as signatures are submitted for ballot initiative. And so from my understanding, they were collecting it, and this is the second round of signatures submitted for this measure in order for an indirect initiated state statute to be placed on the ballot in Ohio. 2 rounds of 124,000 valid signatures are needed. And so this means that a measure needs a total of 249,000 valid signatures, which also includes the initial round of 1,000 signatures needed to file the proposal. So there's a bit more down here, but I will update you, of course, if Ohio does make the necessary signatures needed in order to get this on the ballot. But full link is in the description if you wanted to go through it. Well, we've got this one out of Colorado for Marijuana Moment. A big update out of the most mature market in the country that highlights the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition, as Denver police processed record low amount of illicit cannabis as state's legal cannabis market evolves. As a city report shows that as Colorado nears the 10th anniversary since being the first state to legalize for adult use in 2014, God bless Colorado, its local regulatory framework has effectively reduced the size of the illicit market, with law enforcement processing a record low amount of illegal cannabis in 2022. We love to see that. Again, the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition speak for themselves, but of course this is just the most populated city, Denver. Nonetheless, you can pause to read, but I wanted to bring you down to the main thing from the report. According to the report, police in the city processed 2,435 pounds of legal cannabis in 2022, down 74% since the retailers first opened in 2014 when they seized about 9,500 pounds of illicit cannabis. And so it's possible that in addition to being largely driven by a reduced demand for unregulated products, some of the decline in seizures is attributable to police deprioritizing cannabis enforcement in the legal environment. For all social justice warriors that want to stop racially targeting or whatnot, this is the best way to go about it. If cannabis is no longer illegal, less reason for police to racially target for all those people that think that is such a motivation. While it can be in certain instances, it's not in every instance, right? And it's possible that since cannabis is now legal, organized crime is going to different drugs as well. And so, of course, new solutions create other problems, but we just have to address it and be able to talk about it. And so, a bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read. Well, I'll bring you down here if you wanted to pause to read this bit. Well, there's one more visual down here. Otherwise, I don't want to go through the whole thing, make the video too long. You can grab the full link if you're interested. And while Colorado and many other states have been a success story, we got more on New York from Politico. And so as first one, New York's weed pioneers detail their struggles as they say the state has failed, they have miserably, to follow through on promises to provide them with retail outlet sites and accurate construction costs. And so can't go through this whole one, but I'll bring you down a little bit if you wanted to pause to read and grab the link in the description. But all this is testimony of how badly the Office of Cannabis Management has rolled out their program, especially because of their socialist mindset, trying to control it from the top down and focus on social equity, which makes everyone equally poor because social equity provides equal outcomes. And if no one can open dispensaries, then it's just the black market that thrives, as we've seen in New York. And so Gov. Kathy Hochul now has put the brakes on a plan that would allow licensed cannabis growers and retailers to sell weed and other cannabis products at farmers markets and festivals. While they announced this a few weeks ago, thank you MJ Stock Trader for the update, another expensive setback in the slow rollout of the legal pot industry. So I'll put this link in the description if you want to go through it, but again, just comical. They can't do anything right. Is it incompetence or malice? At this point, you'd have to think it's both. Well, ironically enough, from Brad Racino, my favorite reporter out of New York, providing us with up-to-date info, the interesting thing is that they did manage to fund their $200 million fund from Chicago Atlantic, but we've gotten no details, right? And so will this loan from Chicago Atlantic have a premium placed on it as it is then managed by Weber and Willis? And if so, what is that management fee? Has anyone seen the term sheet from Chicago Atlantic? What about the interest rate? No one knows any of this because all we saw in my last week's video is that when Governor Kathy Hochul said that they funded the amount, all the workers of the Office of Cannabis Management were just praising her. It's crazy. And so these are the right questions we need to ask because, again, it just seems like New York is continuing to shoot themselves in the foot, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. So this link in the description as well if you wanted to go through it. But with that, from Marijuana Moment, Nebraska activists launched signature gathering for 2024 medical cannabis legalization ballot initiatives. And so love to see Nebraska considering getting a medical initiative on the ballot, and as a state that has no medical or legal adult use, this would be the right step to getting people access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative, as this is the campaign's third attempt to give voters a chance to decide on medical cannabis legalization, and I'm sure many of the people in the state do want it. With that, out of Germany, new from Germany from my favorite source across the pond, Alfredo Pasquale, the draft law on Pillar 1 for legal cannabis possession, home cultivation, and cultivation associations is now officially available on the German Ministry of Health website. And so a few comments down here if you were interested in reading, but we got this nice summary from cannabishealthnews.co.uk as Germany's draft law for first phase of cannabis reform and their key takeaways, as the Ministry of Health has finally published its draft law for the first phase of legalization. So quite a bit of details in here. Mind you, Pillar 1 of the Cannabis Act intends to legalize the private cultivation of cannabis by adults for their own consumption, so home cultivation, as well as communal, non-commercial cultivation of cannabis through associations or groups. And so, of course, no legal launch market, unfortunately, because apparently UN treaties override EU's national sovereignty, but that is what Pillar 1 offers. Well, apparently the bill for Pillar 2, which is expected to follow later this year and will be submitted to the European Commission for review. Why? Well, it's the European Commission that's been the fun sponge to ruin Germany's ability to actually legalize in the first place. Sadly, that's the main problem they need to address, but I digress. We'll see the introduction of regional pilot projects with commercial supply chains, and hopefully this does allow for a commercial market that's beneficial to all the industry players in the in Germany, but I digress. A little bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read, but the key takeaways do include all that is listed here, so you can pause to read. Well, I think the extensive list of the draft law is here. It's of course in German, but I'll put the link in the comments. You can probably translate it. Well, there's a bit more here in the article if you wanted to read it, or you can grab the link in the description. But main thing, Boris reiterates, who's the executive chairman of Curaleaf and one of the MSOs trying to get an early foot in Europe, is that Germany is set to remove cannabis from their narcotics list in 2024, effectively descheduling it. Something that U.S. Congress should pay attention to, as Germans leading while the U.S. is continuing to procrastinate. And so one interesting thing to point out, will medical cannabis in prescription still be available at the pharmacy? Apparently, and so at least it doesn't take away from the current medical that is already being supplied. But another interesting thing down here is road traffic. What will cannabis users have to consider in the future if they want to participate in road traffic? Like, what? What will users have to consider if they want to drive? That's fucking troubling if that's really what they're insinuating there. And so a few comments down here I'd figure I'd bring you to if you just wanted to pause to read. But last bit, even from the UK, Scotland calls on the UK to end failed drug war with decriminalization and harm reduction approach. And while I would say that that's a good start, you want to also launch an adult use program. Otherwise, you're just empowering the black market. And so love this call from Scotland, though. Hopefully they can get this done. These are ambitious and radical proposals. No, they're not. They're just smart proposals grounded in evidence that will help save lives. And if governments cared about public health, then obviously they would have ended the war on drugs or the failed war on people a long, long time ago. But with that, from Bullpack, a pack that was formed this year in order to lobby for the Safe Banking Act, and we are closer than ever, folks. And according to them, nearly 10,000 letters sent in the last 2 days since their call to pass the Safe Plus package through the Senate when it returns to session later this month. And if you're a regular viewer of my channel, I'm sure you've done this, and I want to thank you for having done it already. But if you're new to the channel and you haven't done this, please consider doing so. They make it easy. They do the heavy lifting for you. You just have to put your info in here and explain why. It'll make America safer by getting cash off the streets, no longer making these cannabis dispensaries targets for armed robberies, and it'll get the industry into the banking system so that they are no longer discriminated against, unlike any other American industry. It's only the cannabis industry. You cannot make this shit up. And so this link will be in the description. And lastly, just wanted to share an example from Do the Right Thing. I saw this account come on Twitter maybe 4 months ago, and great to see them, add to to this community that we already have. And so, hey, Don Murphy, I think you'll appreciate this. Senator Schmidt from Missouri got back to me today. He supports advancing the Safe Banking Act. And so just sharing this as an example, please consider helping out if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you so much. But big week ahead. Get excited as I think change is on the horizon. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.